A big thank you to our four panellists. This section is about which markets should you be going to, when you should be going, what should you be taking with you, whom should you be hoping to meet, and how should you be pitching to them when you get there. So it's quite all-encompassing. And we feel some of it will be very basic for some of the people in the room, but maybe you can contribute too. The panel from my left, Jackie Edwards, who leads all things acquisitions at the BBC and of course is a fantastic world expert in animation. Juliet Sabar, who is essentially the producer on the panel. That's to say, she heads up Plug-in Media, which started life as a digital media company, but now we can say quite clearly is a pan-media company. Darren Narty is from ITV and heads up acquisitions for kids there, or is it wider than kids? Is it
wider than kids?
Wider than kids. And Nico from C21, who has to attend all of these markets and follow you around the world and find out what you're up to. So we thought he'd be a very good source of intel. So I'm going to start with Nico.
Okay.
What's on offer then? What's out there that we should be thinking about going to?
There's a lot out there. Basically, you could pretty much spend your whole year going to events, preparing to go to the events, then going to the events, and that would be
and here they are.
enough. Yeah, so that's a pretty big spread of all the events from in 2019 that are coming up around the world. So which ones you go to will depend largely on what stage your project that you're trying to pitch or the projects that you're trying to pitch are at, and who you're trying to pitch them to. What you're trying to get out of the event, and also, most importantly, how big your company's travel budget is. And there is a certain rhythm to the year. There are events that are more important than others. I'd say the major tentpole events for a UK kids TV producer are probably beginning at the start of the year, Kids Screen, which is coming up in Miami next month. Then, of course, CMC in Sheffield in June. And MIP Junior, MIPCOM in Cannes in October. So roughly that's one at the beginning of the year, one in the middle of the year, and one towards the end of the year. Then there's a few others as well, but I thought I'd begin just talking about those three and how they're different.
If you would, yeah.
Yeah, so Kids Screen, basically it's very important in terms of meeting North American buyers. CMC covers a lot of important issues in children's media. And MIP Junior is a huge market, basically. So it's very international and very big. And these three events tend to be a mixture of panels, but also opportunities to have meetings and network with potential buyers and business partners, which in Kids Screen and MIP Junior translates as drinking rosé by the beach, and in Sheffield, pints of bitter. So yeah, basically meeting buyers from TV channels and platforms around the world, as well as potential co-producers and distributors. And I know that won't be news to lots of people in the room, but from a very basic standpoint, that's what those are. And there will be some producers who go to those events who won't set foot in any of the kind of panel side of things, because basically their priority there is to have meetings and pitch and drink rosé. I'd say the CMC is a bit of an exception there because it does have a reputation for quite fiery and lively debates, especially if it's a panel about BBC funding. So whereas some producers will choose to go to those panels just to kind of get an inside track on what's going on in the industry. And you'll notice in terms of how they're spread out, there's about a 3-month gap in between each of those key ones. That's basically kids TV moves so slowly compared to a genre like factual that it doesn't really make sense to have multiple meetings with the same buyer in quick succession, so that can backfire. And yeah, like the other slide showed, there are loads of other events that you could potentially go to which are a lot more intimate and are potentially even better networking opportunities, because although the seniority and the number of buyers that are attending those slightly smaller events won't necessarily be as high as compared to Kidscreen or CMC or MIP Junior. You will be getting them in a more intimate setting, so more chances to kind of just strike up a casual conversation, which I know is one of the best ways of starting a business relationship in TV. And also at those events, you're more likely to bump into people who have a bit more of an expertise in things slightly outside of kids' TV. So people who are involved in apps, games, licensing and merchandising, things like that. And a couple of other events I thought it's important to point out that are very important are Cartoon Forum in Toulouse, which I think we'll talk about later on as well, just as a really good way to get a sense of what works in terms of when you're pitching, because basically Cartoon Forum is producers from all around Europe pitching to potential broadcasters and producers, some new producers or some very established ones like the Oscar-nominated Cartoon Saloon in Ireland. So that's a good one for any producer looking to kind of get a sense of what's going on in the industry. And I'll also mention Annecy in France, because that's a great one where the buyers is very relaxed because it's in June. The sun is shining. It's by a very nice lake in France, and there's a real emphasis on kind of the art of animation. And so if you're feeling a bit jaded, that's a good place to go, because a lot of students go. So if you're feeling dispirited about animation, you just speak to one of those, and they'll remind you about why animation is so amazing. And finally, I'll give a little plug to the event the company I work for, C21 Media, runs, which is called Content London, and that happens at the end of the year. And it's primarily an international drama event, but we do have a day focused on kids content, and it's getting bigger and bigger each year. So we had Netflix's Melissa Cobb keynote last year, and that takes place close to here at King's Place in December.
And it was a very good day, yes. I suppose just very quickly on the CMC, that one of the unique thing about the CMC as a market is that we weren't a market for a very, very long time. And when we added a market element, which actually at the time UKTI asked us to do, we added it in a very formal way. So the market actually, the formal market only takes place over one day, and then it closes, and it's all in one room. So you don't have the business of rushing all over the place for 4 days as you would in rushing all over the hotel in Kidscreen, rushing all over Cannes in the other two, or going between Annecy the festival and MIFA the market that's within Annecy the festival. It all happens in one day in a series of facilitated meetings. I just wanted to bring in Jackie here. Of those, talking about Cartoon Forum, why should animation producers be thinking about Cartoon Forum, and how should they be thinking about it?
I think for any producer, economics is going to be very important, because these events are all quite expensive to go to. And I think when you're thinking about planning your market year out, it's being very focused. If you've got a limited budget, being very focused about where and what you're going to pitch. Cartoon Forum is a unique event in my mind, because if you get sort of selected, you get 20 minutes to pitch your show in the way that you want it pitched, without fear of hesitation, repetition, or being interrupted by somebody having to leave.
That's in front of the whole
all
body.
Broadcasters, distributors, financiers, anybody with a bag of cash basically will hopefully turn up to your pitch, and you pitch it the way you want it pitched, and it is fairly unique. All of the markets, MIP TV, MIPCOM, Kidscreen, you've got an allocated time, so somebody's always late, and then they have to go early, and so you end up sort of with a very, very quick pitch once you've talked about how was their journey there, etc. So Cartoon Forum's a unique event. I think if you've never been to a market or to Cartoon Forum, try and go there as just to sort of...
Yeah, they have an observer ticket.
They do, and it's worth going to see, just to see how people do it, because people do it very differently. I know Mr. Gardner went for the first time last year, rave reviews all round, but it is an interesting thing to go to. So if you're an animation producer, it's definitely, so it should be top of the list. Likewise, Annecy. because as Nico says, it is a very relaxed environment. Lakeside, very nice, but it is absolutely about the creativity and the creators. So, as a broadcaster, most of us want to we respond best to creator-driven shows, and it's a great opportunity to hear it from the heart of the creator. So, but honestly, Cartoon Forum are probably sort of top of my list for animation pitches. But every market has its benefits. And there's a lot of competition between markets as well. Certainly MIP TV is feeling the heat from Kids Screen, and so MIP TV offers a lot of additional entertainments for kids producers now. They've special events there. They're doing a preschool focus.
This is the April MIP.
MIP, yeah. So the things that, and it's also quieter, so you can get sort of good quality meetings with broadcasters because they mostly go.
Yes.
So there's a lot to recommend for each thing, but if you're on a limited budget, think about what you're going to pitch, who you want to see, and plan well ahead.
So Darren, when you have these conversations at markets, and I think you were saying earlier on you attend slightly fewer perhaps than Jackie does, for example.
That's right.
Yeah. When you have them, what's the balance between wanting to have a creative and as a commercial organisation wanting to have that commercial conversation up front?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting because everyone assumes because it's ITV and we're a commercial channel, it's always the business side is the most important thing, but it's not. I think if you look across all ITV channels, with our drama, with our entertainment, it's always the creative leading it. We're quite a big broadcaster, and if we really believe in a project, we will go above and beyond to make the business side work. So our advice to producers is always get the creative side working perfectly. Make sure it hits. You do your research on the channel to make sure what you're pitching to us is the right content. And if we think it will work for us, we will do the business side with you. We will work with you to bring it to the screen.
Yeah.
So I mean, often I'll say 90% or even 100% the creative side. Get that right for the channel, and then we can look at the business side.
So, coming back to you, Jackie, what makes you want to meet someone? I mean, how does that process work?
I went to the joke I did earlier, Greg.
It had something to do with swiping left and right, isn't it?
Joke.
Never let it be said.
I think, we always try and see a mixture of people at markets, sort of people we know, familiar faces, look at you, Juliet, and then people we don't know, and sort of, because you never know where you're going to find the next big thing. So we sort of look at all invitations for meetings, and we ask people to sort of describe what it is they want to talk about.
So
and
ahead of the meeting,
yeah,
you
and just
want
like
to know,
a really top line, is it actually for us? As Darren says,
Yeah.
sometimes people can pitch the most inappropriate things.
and of course at CMC that we do that using our
You
profiling
do that for
system.
us, yes.
Yeah. Well, there is a wonderful anecdote about the lady from ABC who came out with the first ever CMC market and went, I only met preschool people. How did they know I was looking for preschool? Because you wrote it in your profile. Duh. And we use this online system to sort of matchmake before it starts. We don't matchmake manually, but we allow both parties to sniff each other out.
Absolutely, and we do a lot of sniffing. It's a really handy tool because you can tell at a glance, and if people are putting their project sort of proposal top line there as well, it'll give us a really good idea if it's going to be within our purview. So we ask people, and we are always completely oversubscribed in terms of meeting requests. Probably by about 10 to 1. So it's really going to be, is the project something that's potentially for us, and are they being charming in their email?
But when that rejection comes,
yes,
it is. People do have to be aware that it is to do with your strategies, your needs, and your development plans.
And sometimes we really do get so many meeting requests for every single market, and sometimes it's just not possible to meet all the people you would want to meet. So we ask people to send materials, and in circumstances like that, Kids Screen, I was saying earlier. Last year, I was sort of on the go from dawn to dusk, and I didn't stop. I mean, I practically had to get catheterised. I was that busy. But it was never pitch in the toilet, please. I've taken it down a notch again, haven't I? But it's like, so don't be offended if we can't get a meeting in, because literally we have too many requests all the time. But if we ask you to send materials in, please do. because we will review in time. Sometimes after a market we get an absolute tsunami of submissions, but we will get back to everybody eventually.
And Darren, what's the balance between something that's really sort of innovative and unusual and something that sort of hits the marks of what you're definitely looking for? Are you still open to things that sort of come up on the outside edge, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what we do when we're going to market, I think if we knew exactly the show we wanted to do, we wouldn't go to market to look for it. We would just go ahead and make it ourselves. But we want to find something that we don't already have on the channel. So the more innovative it is, I certainly think it's better. As I said to you before, the business side, yes, we can have a conversation afterwards. Obviously, it's amazing if you're giving us a show mostly funded, but that shouldn't be sort of, the business side shouldn't be the reason why you would contact us to say, oh, I have this show already on the shelf, etc., with all my partners. Would ITV want to put it out there? Because sometimes I do find that I do get pitched content purely because they want home for it and not necessarily because it's right for the channel. Yeah. So we have to think about things like that, but we do want the producers to think about it as well.
Juliet, from the, I'm sorry, I'm looking away, I'm just trying to keep tabs on the time. From the point of view of the producer then, when is it right to take your project to market? I mean, how do you make those plans?
So I have definitely taken projects to market too early, and I've definitely done the kind of Groundhog Day situation I think Nico mentioned, where you're kind of meeting the same people and pitching the same project. It's too close to when you last pitched the same project. So I think it depends very much on the project, and for me now, I think it's very much about having a very kind of honed strategy about something and saying, what do I want to get out of this market for this particular project, and focusing in on it. Because, you know, as Jackie said, they're really expensive events. Actually pitching at them can be quite grueling. You're quite often doing it with someone who's late to a meeting, you've only got half an hour time slot, you're jet lagged, all of that kind of stuff working against you. So if it's a pitch that you can do in a more comfortable setup in London or at a smaller market, then I think that's really, really important. So I would say it's really got to be about looking at that project and saying, what do I want to get out of it? Is it about getting a broadcaster? Is it about getting a second, third, fourth pre-buy? Is it about getting a distributor? And actually really honing your deck to that particular purpose. And so you might have a different deck that you're presenting to a distributor to the one that you're presenting to a broadcaster. And equally, I would say, because they're international events, you know, you can quite often go there and just end up having meetings with people that you would meet in London anyway. So for us, they've been really useful to meet with partners and clients around the world. So it's that opportunity to meet people because everybody's in the same place at the same time. So that international angle, I think, is really, really important. Sorry, that's slightly off that question.
No,
I think it's a really important point, though, because networking, you know, not just meeting people that potentially buyers, but networking, expanding your sort of retinue of friends and family across the world is really, really useful. You never know when it's going to come into play, but sometime that friend you made 5 years ago at Kids Screen would be very, very useful in helping you achieve something in that particular territory. So make friends with as many people as you can.
And I think, I mean, you're in listening mode, aren't you, when you're in these places?
Yeah, so as a journalist, my role there is to basically write news stories. So a lot of that comes from the panels and things, but also bumping into people like contacts and remembering what they might have, you know, have going on, if there's been any updates. A lot of asking, you know, if someone's changed jobs, or if there's a, you know, especially at broadcasters, because people stories are our most popular news stories. So everyone in the business wants to find out where their contact is either going or is leaving, or so that's a key part of it as well, is just keeping tabs on everyone. And
it's a people business. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? The one of the key attributes that I feel, I'm afraid you will need to have, is the capacity to listen and get on with people and find out what they do. Because if you can find out what they do, you can start to work out some of the ways in which they can help you do what you do, and you'll also then stimulate them to be asking you what you do, and that's where the great partnerships come from. And of course, that's another thing that is going on at these markets. It's not just selling. You yourself are also selling services.
Yeah, we will quite often. So I'll quite often draw up a list of the people that I want to meet, and then I'll have like 3 different emails, all of which are personalised slightly. But there might be one that's selling our services. There might be one that's a informal. Let's have a catch up. I might say I haven't got anything to talk about at the moment, but it'd be really good to understand what you want and what you're after. And then there might be stuff that's more focused to a particular project. But we've got meetings we've had briefs through, so we've met with overseas broadcasters and said, what are you looking for? And then a couple of weeks later we'll get a email saying, oh, we really want a project that's like this, and then we'll be able to develop something that's much more targeted to what they want. So yeah, it's not just about presenting the projects that we've got at the top of our slate.
Just one more thing to add. In terms of markets for us as well, I think as a broadcaster, we go to market to try and find out what the latest trends are in the kids space, because sometimes we can be in a bit of a bubble, working in ITV towers or etc., where we're working at. So it's good to have a conversation. So whilst you're pitching to us, we are also trying to learn from you about what's the latest trends when it comes to animation, etc. I think in the kids space especially, where the funding models can be quite complex, we go out there also looking for potential partners, so not just producers but other broadcasters from around the world, which we can get from when we go to Kids Screen or MIP TV, etc. So it is a two-way thing, so we're learning the same way you guys are as well.
Never underestimate the value of gossip.
Exactly.
There are studies have been made, haven't they, as to the extent to which gossip actually makes business function. Juliet, when the other area of potential interest for you in these markets is you're meeting, in a way, producers like yourself and the capacity, to some extent, the capacity to make partnerships, because you're obviously in digital media as well. So does that feature for you?
Yeah, we've done meetings where we've been partnering with people, maybe presenting our interactive services to someone, saying, well, if you've got an IP that we can develop a game or a interactive proposition around it. So we've done a kind of, I suppose I'll show you mine if you show me yours kind of thing, where we'll do a bit of a, this is our slate, what's yours, and we'll talk about how we might be able to collaborate together. That's been quite valuable.
So Jackie, when they're sitting in front of you, there they are. They've been swiped, and they're there, sitting in front of you. What is it you want to see and hear at that stage?
Passion, and also just a clear understanding of what their concept is and who it's for, and really communicating what the headline idea is and why it's going to be good for our channel. Time is limited in all sort of those pitch sessions, so it's really getting a big idea across and understanding what it is, who it's for, and whether we want to see more. Going into sort of too much in depth is probably going to be counterproductive, because I've very little bandwidth, quite frankly, and if you have too many sort of big sort of meaty pitches, it can all start to blend into one. So I remember big ideas that are clearly conveyed.
Like
so
what
I think
it's for.
What it's for, what's it going to do, what is the special sauce? So really, I'd say, I used to be an independent producer, and it was just sort of, that was sort of something I used to work on, is just like really clearly communicating what the project is. Why is it different? Why is it going to do something different for the audience?
And do you get a lot of people who are very, I'll ask Darren as well, do you get a lot of people who are very close to their projects and are now chuntering through stuff which is
they know too much.
Details?
They know too much, and I completely understand that thing, because development is all about that and finding out everything about it, but then you've got to kind of go back and distill it down to the essence to communicate it.
The only thing to add is, we appreciate that it's people's passion, some of these projects, and they want to go above and beyond to try and get it to work. I think everything Jackie said is right, but also just do your research on as I said before, on the channel you're pitching for, because it's quite frustrating to sit through a half an hour meeting and you're pitching something that's totally wrong for the channel. I appreciate if the meeting is being set up to introduce yourself, etc., etc. I think that's fine, but to sort of pitch something that's totally wrong for the channel is a real shame. So definitely do think about that.
In a way, slightly different at CMC. In that, I'm sorry I keep coming back to this, but CMC is interesting for me in that I think it's a sort of first look market. There are some deals are being slightly higher up the food chain are beginning to happen there, but it is a very early market, I think. I mean, what
and I think
you've experienced people pitching there.
Absolutely, and you
and it is only 15 minutes.
Sometimes it's the start of a beautiful friendship, and that's what I'm saying. It's sort of conveying that big idea and like making me want to know more about it, and sort of following up with them, sort of sooner rather than later, and then say, well, we'll catch up at the next market or come and visit. But it's the start of a beautiful friendship. I always think of it that way, if the project sort of feels right.
And so to be clear about going back to our list, if you've got CMC as a relatively early, relatively boutique, I mean, whereas Kidscreen has, is it 400 buyers? We have about 50, 60, maybe 70 if you include the British contingent. We have
quality
about 50, 60.
Quality.
All quality. Yeah. All, yes. Yeah, never mind the quality. Deal with. But when you come to CMC, maybe you're going to an early stage thing. When you go to Cartoon Forum, you've got to have made something, haven't you?
The bells and the whistles need to be attached fully, because basically they've got a list of requirements. You have to have 2 scripts, and you have to do a 45-second trailer.
And
so
you need a broadcaster.
Not necessarily a broadcaster. You need a
sponsorship
statement
letter.
of intent. Yeah, so that can come from a distributor now as well.
Yeah.
Right. And then in between all of those, you've got Kidscreen and, let's say, MIP Junior, MIPCOM. MIP Junior, I always think of as an acquisition market, mostly. People in the old days doing a lot of viewing of existing finished product.
Yeah, there's a lot of library content there. But I think, more and more broadcasters want to get into projects early, so they have a bit of sort of influence on it. So there's a whole sort of section of projects in development as well at the screenings. So you get trailers, teasers, pilot episodes there as well. But you're right, the mid markets, there's more distributors than producers there, and they are buying and selling stuff.
And then why do people go to MIP Junior and stay on for MIPCOM?
It is a good point. I mean, Junior is
it's on the weekend.
It's on the weekend, so that's nice. But that's sort of part conference, part screening, and part meetings. But it's more about the conference and the screenings, and then MIPCOM during the week is very much meeting focused.
I think it's like the distribution companies have their stands, don't they? And they won't have one set up for MIP Junior, but they'll have one set up for MIPCOM.
Meetings go on at Junior, but it's not kind of as focused as the week.
The number of people you can meet is basically much smaller at MIP Junior than in the Palais at MIPCOM.
Yeah, but it is very focused. So, I mean, a lot of producers I know sort of take a very sort of efficient view of it, and I go, right, I need to see Joe Blogs, XYZ, and I can see them all if I am charming enough to try and line up my meetings for the weekend, get a couple of conference sessions in, have a nice dinner, and be home by Sunday night. So,
And of course, everyone has to be aware that there are 2 separate tickets.
There are 2 separate tickets.
Cheap.
They're not cheap.
Yeah.
But, people do stay on because you've got sort of Monday through Thursday to try and set up meetings, and it is really hard to get meetings with broadcasters. It is. It's demand exceeds supply, unfortunately. So you've got more chance if you stay on. But
what do you see differentiation between Kidscreen and MIPCOM, MIP Junior?
Probably because of the time of year. The way ITV works is a bit weird because we do our budgeting right at the beginning of the year. So what else have we got to play with, and can we invest in anything? So the sooner the market for us, the better. So if we desperately need anything for the autumn, we'll be going to markets sort of the early part of the year, Q1, to see what we can do. So that's sort of how we prepare for it. If it's obviously a big commission, then it doesn't really matter. We'll give the producer as much time as they need. To an extent, obviously, to get it right for us. But that's sort of the main differences for us.
Right. And Juliet, there you are. You're now in the pitch. What are your top tips for these pitching moments?
Well,
and again, it depends where you are, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, both of you saying how it's about the creative, just because I kind of find it quite a difficult place to pitch creative. Well, I think what you were saying about being able to present, at Cartoon Forum, being able to present it how you want to present it, that's just so important, because it's just so easy to overload a half-hour slot, which then becomes a 20-minute meeting, with a whole load of ideas, none of which you can go into much depth. So, I think that kind of clear message, what is the purpose and the why of that project, and what do you want from the person that you're speaking to, that's what you've got to be absolutely crystal clear about, because it's a lot of information to get through in quite a noisy environment in a short space of time.
Generally. I think Cartoon Forum's the only one where it's permissible to dress up as a character.
All right, we've all done
Because
it.
usually there's an outright ban on there. Usually, but
Put your money where your mouth is, which is the pitch.
people do that there as well.
At
Yes, quite a lot of
CMC, yes,
freebies
we
and
allow that.
sweets and stuff that
But
people
yeah,
give
the
you.
pitches during Cartoon Forum are getting more theatrical in a way.
One can see that in the photographs, yes.
Yeah. So, and those tend to be the pitches that people talk about afterwards.
So when
but
the
it
lady
can
dressed
backfire,
as a
it can backfire.
clown pitched you at Kids Screen, did you?
She kissed me and she gave me a ring and an aeroplane, so there.
So she's getting a commission then?
No.
The only thing to say is, please, Jackie touched up on it earlier on, do not pitch to us in the toilets. It has happened to me before, at the urinal, so...
It's messy. It's not necessary. I was just... There's one final thing I want to explore, really. When you're planning for markets, how do you, Juliet, choose who it is you're planning to try to meet? What's your strat? What
It's
are your
such a
strategies there?
horrible job, because if you start trawling through one of those databases,
Kids Screen Exchange.
oh my God, it's just such a big job, and it's such a hard job to delegate to people, because it's, in my company, I'm the person who knows those people, and I can't really get someone else to do it. So yeah, as I say, I kind of tend to group, what do I want, what projects am I actually presenting, or what services am I presenting, and then kind of group people into different categories in terms of what I need to be targeting, what type of people am I targeting, and what am I presenting.
And where are you
to
gathering
them.
your intel for that grouping?
LinkedIn's quite useful. I do use the databases. The CMC Mojo is brilliant, because as you've said, it's
Tells
very,
you.
very clear. But I mean, like going through a Kids Screen database or a MIPCOM database is horrendous. So I do try, and I will kind of maybe beg email addresses of people I know who might know them. Because I don't think arranging meetings through those systems is very successful generally. So
No.
I think you have to do sort of personal approaches, which is why I quite often will use LinkedIn or a personal connection to try and get an email address, and then
the fundamental intel is coming out of you have to read the magazines.
you
have to read the
Screen
intelligence that's
newsletter
coming
and-
the
Yeah.
C21 articles, what is actually going on.
Kids Screen used to a really good kind of what the buyer's looking for kind of brochure thing, I think. I don't know if they still do that.
Yeah, they
kind
still
of,
do.
yeah. So those kind of things are useful, I guess, because it enables us to be more targeted too.
And I think look at broadcaster websites as well, because we put commission
Yeah.
briefs in what our acquisition
Yeah.
wants and needs are as well. It's updated every 6 months or so. But, it's worth a look, because it'll give you sort of a general sense of our proclivities.
And so public broadcasters do tend to be a bit more open, a lot more open than any of especially the North American commercial channels, who tend to say they just want something innovative or interesting,
Fabulous.
or fabulous or exciting, without going into very many specifics.
Yes.
So, whereas on the BBC's website there is a lot more info.
I'm going to very, very quickly, we've got a couple of minutes to spare maybe. Are there any specific... Yes. If you shout out your question really loud. Jean, Kitson, yes.
Question for Juliet, two but they're related. So when you're saying, do you have a preferred way, once you've got maybe first broadcaster interest, do you want second, third, fourth broadcaster, do you want, or do you want distributor? Do you have a preferred way around of doing it, or does it just kind of depend? And because you said you have to have sometimes different decks for distributors and different ones for what you'll say to the broadcasters or platforms, what is the difference in focus there for you?
Oh gosh, okay, so, well, I think there was a sort of strategy, and I don't know whether this is still going to be valid, with media funding, when once you had a key broadcaster on board, you would then go around the other broadcasters so that you could get enough pre-buys in order to get a media grant application in. So who knows what's happening there, but that's one approach that you can take, and I guess any pre-buy is a good pre-buy. But so I guess that's there's one way of approaching it, going to other broadcasters once you've got someone on board. But I think there's always a kind of recognition that maybe they're looking at their own markets first as well. So again, I think you need to be quite focused about who you're targeting and whether what you're targeting to them is right for them. In terms of how we change our decks, I think it's just about why am I meeting you? What do I want from you? And that might be a different scenario if you're asking for a very specific amount of money versus asking for a general, an interest or a sponsorship letter or kind of whatever stage that project's at. And so, whilst the creative is the same, and we might do a really kind of creative pitch to a broadcaster, with a distributor, I guess we'd be more focused on the business and the finance plan and what we've got, what we're trying to get from that meeting there. Does that help?
I will take another if there is another. Right at the back. Can you stand up? Thanks.
My company actually manages the biggest kids YouTubers, and we get one of our channels gets 350 million views a month. And we're at a stage where we're right at the beginning, where we're actually looking to create a new channel for that within the animated space. We're looking to find a company that can really animate and create some good content, because we've got the fan base there and the advertisers to push it. Where do you start on that sort of journey? Is there a place right at the bottom where you can go and find...
Literally everyone's going to be running to you, mate.
Yes, meet your new friends.
I'm in the toilet with you. Not me.
Well, come and say hello when you can. With Alex, I'm from Viral Talent, that's the company. That's my business partner, Laura.
I think, Jackie, where would you start if you were starting an... basically what you're asking is, you basically want to start an animation channel, essentially. And you don't want to play with the big boys, you want to get in with some of the startups, with some of the smaller companies. Jackie, where would you go?
You could talk to very many people in this room. You can go to the university graduation shows for talent.
In the UK?
Yeah, film school, NFTS. Bournemouth, there's plenty of great talent coming out of uni.
I thought there were issues attached to that, though.
VFX, yeah. So there are lots, and again, in that sort of calendar, there are sort of opportunities.
But also, it's possibly quite an interesting project to pitch at Cartoon Forum, isn't it? Because there's a lot of projects that come into Cartoon Forum from a different
perspective,
digital angle and stuff, which they quite liked, don't they?
Yeah. But there are lots of people in this room that know about animation, and they're big companies, small companies, and some in between. Student shows, and just if you speak to Kate at Animation UK, she knows some people.
I speak to Animation UK.
She knows some people. Yeah.
And in a public way, CMC, the great thing about having a conference that is heavily attended by all of the attendees, as opposed to simply being at the market or simply networking, is that you could propose to us a conference session about that very topic, because that's how the conference sessions get built at CMC. They come from the ground up. So you can contact me about that. Of course, you're not the only one. There are others out there who are in similar situations to you, and that I hope we're going to pick up a little bit on that in the next panel. And perhaps that's what we ought to do now, is move on to the next panel. With big thanks to everybody here. Jackie has to rush away, but I think everyone else is staying. So.